Okay, well, I think we will just go ahead and get started here, and then as people, if others join us, we'll move that right along. I appreciate you guys for hopping in. This is an exciting time for us to be able to share local Tennessee Achieves data, progress, Tennessee Promise student update with Tennessee Achieves mentors and other stakeholders in the community. Always exciting to talk to a Northeast Tennessee group. As a Northeast Tennessee native, I feel a special calling to ensure that those students are supported in that part of the region. So definitely appreciate you guys for serving as mentors and being invested in our work. We are this entire week updating every county on their progress. So this is this is the hour for Washington County. So I'm excited to share some of this data with you. The purpose of these presentations, really, I think there's three roles or three purposes for them. Number one is to provide everyone with sort of a well-rounded understanding of Tennessee Achieves. I think in general, we've done a really good job of telling certain parts of the Tennessee Achieves story to certain people, but we haven't always told the entire story and painted the entire picture. So we're going to do that pretty briefly in the beginning of the presentation, and then we'll dig into some Washington County numbers, benchmark those against the state just to see where we are, and then we'll wrap it up with some action items and some ways that you guys can dig into the work alongside of us. So we'll go ahead and kick this off. My name's Ben Sterling. I serve as the Senior Director of Outreach at Tennessee, or Senior Director of Content, my title changed, sorry, at Tennessee Achieves. And I've been with the organization professionally since June of 2014. Prior to that, I was a student in the program when it launched back in 2009. So I've been involved in about every capacity that you can be with the organization and seen it from its beginnings to where we are today. We have grown slowly and steadily for the last decade. We expanded. Our first expansion was with the class of 2012. We expanded to 14 counties. And ever since then, we've grown every year. Today, we are serving, as you can see on your screen, nearly every county in the state. And since 2008, we've worked with 440,000 students, over 440,000 students, and recruited over 71,000 volunteers. So let's move on just a little bit here. Look at our scope. Again, we're working with 90 counties across the state. 74 of those are considered rural counties. 35 of those are considered at-risk or distressed counties by the Department of Economic and Community Development. In those 90 counties, we work with 601 high schools. That includes all of the state's public high schools, charter schools, private schools, home schools. Anyone in those counties in which we're serving can access Tennessee Promise. In terms of our college partners, we're working with 67 institutions. That includes all 13 Tennessee community colleges, 27 TCATs, and a variety of four-year public and private institutions. The ratios here on your screen show where Tennessee Promise students are enrolling. It probably come as no surprise to see that most students are enrolling at a community college. That tends to fill a lot of needs for students in a local institution, whether that means that they're earning an associate's degree and entering the workforce, or using it as sort of a training ground to transfer to a four-year institution on down the road. So almost 80% of our students are choosing that pathway, with 11% of our students enrolling at a TCAT. This is a number that has grown in the last couple of years. It's grown from 8% to 11%. And I think that probably is in part because TCATs have found a way to be more diverse in terms of their offerings and the times at which programs are offered, and just really reaching students where they are. Continuing to discuss our reach in terms of how many students we're serving. Every year we work with at least 60,000 high school seniors. Those are those that are applying for Tennessee Promise. This equates out to be 89% of Tennessee's high school seniors that we work with annually. 78% of all first-time freshmen at Tennessee community colleges are Tennessee Achieves students. And then when they finish, 86% of all Tennessee community college graduates are Tennessee Achieves students. So we are working with nearly every student at every level along the way. In the middle of this page, you'll see just some general demographic information. This isn't unique to Washington County. This is statewide. 56% of our students are eligible for federal financial aid, meaning that they fall under a certain income threshold based on their FAFSA. 40% of our students say that they are the first in their families to go to college or first generation college students. As we've considered and continued to talk about serving first generation students, we've realized that the definition for first generation is different for just about everybody. There's no consistent definition for that. So I think a lot of times students don't realize that they are a first generation college student, even when they are, because they think of like an aunt or a cousin that went to college and they don't consider themselves first generation. But the way that I see it is if you were the first person in your direct family to go to college, meaning you, your parents, and your siblings, you're a first generation college student. And so I would imagine this number may be even a little bit higher. And then you can see on the right side of your screen, 51% of our students are majoring in a health science or STEM related field. I think this is just important considering where our economy in Tennessee is growing. If you look at where the industry is expanding, it's in manufacturing, it's in engineering, it's in healthcare. So we like to see that our students are studying those disciplines. Would love to see that number continue to grow. We were at a lunch a couple of weeks ago in Chattanooga with State Senator Bo Watson, who is a physician by trade. And he was telling the students in attendance, if you took out a map of the United States and you threw a dart at it and you hit a city, there's a healthcare job waiting for you there. And he's like, I want you to stay in Tennessee, but you could technically go anywhere in the country and find a job if you are majoring in healthcare. And so that's really inspired me to talk to students about that when they're unsure of what they want to do. I can almost guarantee them that there's a well-paying job on the other end if they just study something in healthcare or engineering. The bottom of this page, you'll see $32 million is the annual cost for Tennessee Promise. This comes out to be about $1,000 per semester per award. And then the Tennessee Achieves annual operating budget, $2.5 million. This goes towards things like staff salaries, facilities, technology, travel expenses, anything really other than the scholarship itself. I think, again, going back to what I was saying at the beginning, I think we've done a good job of talking about some of these aspects of our program to certain groups of people. But we really wanted to make sure that for those of you that have hopped on, have listened to this, or those that listen to the recording, when you get done, you at least understand, have a broader understanding of the work that Tennessee Achieves is trying to do in each community. As you look at this slide, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, the Tennessee Promise logo. Tennessee Promise really serves as the backbone of what Tennessee Achieves does. Without Tennessee Promise, we don't have those 60,000 students to work with annually. It's what brings people to the table. When students and parents hear that they can attend college for free, it tends to perk their ears up. So Tennessee Promise being that scholarship that allows students to attend community and technical college tuition free. Once students get into our program, I think it's the wraparound supports that we provide that tend to be the most important. The first one of those supports that they'll encounter is the volunteer mentor program that we'll talk more about at the end of this presentation, but I think it's really the glue that holds all of this together. Having local people invested in the work can only mean good things. The community service requirement continues with Tennessee Achieves. I think it's a valuable part of what we offer for students. Even if they don't quite realize it at first, 96% of them are telling us that they're glad that they did the community service that they did. So what that to me is saying is that students are completing their requirement and then they're becoming more community minded. Hopefully when they enter the workforce on down the road, that continues. That's really the idea behind that. Our summer programs are continuing to grow and we're continuing to innovate in that space. This year, we offered 3 summer programs for the first time. That was our in-person summer bridge program, the traditional one that we always have held since 2012. We made an online version of that really in response to the pandemic, but it actually ended up being something that had some positive unintended consequences. One of those was the fact that students in a lot of areas where transportation or geography really limited their ability to get to a summer bridge program, they were able to still get the benefits of that in terms of the online modules that we offered in that space. And then we had the Summer Institute in Memphis, which is kind of like our summer bridge program, but beefed up. It's a credit-bearing program. It's 6 weeks. And so when the students participate in that program, they enter college with college credit hours and also eliminating the need for any remediation when they start college. We had 29 participants in that program in Memphis this year and had a 100% success rate. So that program is certainly something we would love to see continue to grow across the state. Complete is our coaching model. Lakin on our team here that's joining us is a Complete coach, actually. And so Complete, we launched back with the class of 2019, aimed at students that were from a low-income background. After analysis, we realized that parent income tended to be one of the largest indicators of student success. Students from a low-income background tended to drop out of college at a higher rate than their peers. So we were seeking to address that through intentional coaching by pairing these students with a person on our staff who would coach them through the entire college process. From the time they start college right now, actually for the class of 21, they start college and then all the way through and see them through to the end. And so we've seen a lot of really nice success with this program, and we're continuing to innovate in that space. Let's talk about some data. So you see program benchmarks here focusing on 2 Tennessee Promise requirements. The first one is the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. This is the application that students complete for all federal and state aid in Tennessee. We see this as sort of the first step towards college. So we obviously track this very closely throughout the entire filing period, and really want to have a really high percentage in this because that means there's more students that are at least taking an active step towards college. Washington County was right at state average, so can't complain about that. We saw a lot of counties that traditionally had, maybe I shouldn't say a lot, we did see a few counties that traditionally had really high FAFSA file rates that were impacted by the pandemic, where it was harder to get a hold of students. But in Washington County, that certainly wasn't the case. So if you see a school counselor around there somewhere, give them a pat on the back because they were able to really hold up their end. In terms of community service hours, Washington County students have completed over 46,000 hours of community service. It's a whole lot. And I would say there's some community organizations out there that have really benefited from this requirement. If you are a part of a community organization, a church organization, employer, something, a nonprofit that relies on volunteers, certainly reach out to us so we can share those opportunities with our students. There is no reason you can't be advertising that to Tennessee Promise students. They need the hours. I would say typically if you have an event and you're looking for volunteers, anything that's close to a Tennessee Promise deadline tends to have the best response. And if it's outside, that also tends to have a good response. So keeping that in mind. So let's benchmark Washington County students against the state. So to lay this data out for you a little bit, you've got the first row, Tennessee Promise applicants. This is from, those students are from the class of 2021. So those that are actually starting college right now. You've got students enrolled with Tennessee Promise and first year retention rate. That is related to the class of 2019. And then the last row, 3-year graduation rate, that is from the class of 2017. So looking at that 935 Tennessee Promise applicants and then 327 students enrolled with Tennessee Promise, that may feel like a pretty big drop. And I think in counties, after we've looked at some of the data statewide, any county that has a major 4-year institution in the county, there's a this percentage of students that enroll using Tennessee Promise tends to be a little bit lower. So if you think Putnam County, where Tennessee Tech is, Washington County, where ETSU is, you've got Montgomery County, where Austin P is, Rutherford County, where MTSU, Hamilton with UTC. Those places tend to see a little bit lower percentage of students that enroll, but I think you can still see that the students persist and retain on a very similar level to the rest of the state. So looking at that first year retention rate, just a little bit under the state average. Again, this is almost across the board in terms of those counties where you see that 4-year institution in the county, that retention rate just is a little bit under the state average. Not sure why, but that has been pretty consistent across the board. And then you've got the 3-year graduation rate right on par with the state average, which I think is a good thing. Given that the first year retention rate's a little lower, the students that are pushing through are graduating at the same rate as the state average. If you zoom out just a little bit and look at tnAchieves students versus their peers across the state, our students retain for their first year retention rate is 14 percentage points above the state average. Their 6-year graduation rate, 16 percentage points above the state average. And what this says to me is that supports matter and that these wraparound services, the suite of services that we provide are actually making a difference and having an impact on student success. If you look on the side of this screen, you'll see some of our programs and the way that they've impacted first year retention. Summer program participants are 34% more likely to retain. Students that are coached through complete are 23% more likely to retain. And then students in Knox County that have participated in our Knox Promise program are 42% more likely to retain. The only difference between Knox Promise and Complete is that Knox Promise students have had access to what we call completion grants for the last 2 years. Completion grants are emergency funding, essentially. We don't like to use that term, but essentially that's what it is. So if a student has a financial barrier and that's somehow impacting their ability to succeed in college, we can provide them with funding to eliminate that financial barrier up to a certain amount. This week's actually really exciting for us because we've announced statewide completion grants. We were able to work with the General Assembly and we have acquired some dollars that can be used in terms of completion grants for students outside of Knox County. So students in Washington County who have a financial need, tnAchieves has dollars that can be used to alleviate some of that. I know Lakin has been working with students in her region, up in the northeast part of the state, to help them. So it is really exciting. We often get asked, where does that funding go? What types of things are students requesting funding for? Typically, I think the most common are gas to get to and from campus, groceries, and then like textbooks, technology, and tools, just materials for school. We do have some unique requests like auto repairs, housing, childcare costs, those types of things. But I think a majority of them are gas, groceries, and textbooks, all of which can be barriers to students succeeding in class. And we are really excited to be able to help them with that. And we're also excited to continue to track the success of those students that are receiving those so that we can make the case to make that an even bigger and more boisterous program.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah.
Question about that.
Sure.
How does a student become aware that that resource exists for them? Is that something that you're pushing out to all students, or do they have to request it from somebody like Lakin, or how does that work?
That's a good question. So we target students based on their EFC. So for the complete grants across the state, they have to have a 0 EFC, 0 estimated family contribution, based on FAFSA. So those students who have met that criteria receive an email from us announcing and informing them of the complete grant process. So then they complete a form on our website to request funding for a particular reason. That goes to someone like Lakin, who analyzes that, determines the amount, what it's for, and then gets all the necessary details together. Those go to our executive director, who then individually checks off on each one of those before the money is dispersed. So they know about it. Those students that are eligible for it should know about it because we've emailed it out to them.
And is that a recurring allocation from the General Assembly that this money will be available, or do you have to like reapply every funding cycle to make sure those funds are going to continue to be available to students?
I'm not exactly sure. I think it's a one-time funding, one-time payment right now, but I think that's something that we're going to continue to work on. It was a $250,000 allotment, so that is obviously we're working through to see how long that lasts, how many students we can serve with that based on the cap that we give them.
That's not a huge budget allocation, so I can't imagine if you show impact that wouldn't be sustainable to continue it. Just something that I came across as I was, sorry to hijack your.
You're good. Go ahead. Absolutely.
But as I was researching for my master's, I came across the Panther Retention Grant at Georgia State University. They were finding obstacles amongst their students who were like just a couple $100 away from, having a tuition gap or a gap in their what they could afford to pay versus what their balance was. And Georgia State found that if they just started covering that without even having people to apply, they saw their retention rate go up. So that might be some really interesting comps to look at as like some innovative programs other universities or systems have done to say like, I know we want to be responsible with the money, but even if we don't make people apply, if we just meet needs as they're presented to us, what does actually do to retention rates? So just, I don't know, throw that out there for your chew on that a little bit, I guess.
Definitely. Georgia State is a peer institution, no doubt. We've worked with them a ton. I've heard from their president in a leadership program that I was a part of, but I know that our executive director, Chrissy, has spent many hours working with Georgia State to try to copy some of the things that they've done. And I think the what you just talked about informed creating the completion grants for the Knox Promise program originally. That was actually where the idea came from. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, very interesting that you mentioned that.
I think their president was the one that actually put the seed funding in through a donation to get theirs started. So
yeah,
somebody presented him with an idea that was just an idea, and he's like, hey, let's try it. Let's think outside the box. So that's great that you guys are able to replicate that here. That's wonderful. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Georgia State's a model. There's no doubt. I mean, you look at the success that they've had. It's something that we at tnAchieves very much believe in because they had this idea of try a lot of supports, over support put too many, more supports, the better. You can't put too many supports. You might think it's too many, but it's not, because you never know which support is going to actually strike for that student. So that's definitely the model and the approach that we're taking at Tennessee Achieves. I think there's a lot of similarities that you can draw between Tennessee Achieves and what Georgia State's doing. All right, so let's move on to the next slide here. Talking about the drop in Tennessee's college going rate. This is probably the largest impact that the pandemic had overall in the work that we do. And you can see here, pretty significant, not only in Tennessee, but also in Washington County. In Tennessee, we saw a huge increase in the state's college going rate back in 2015 when we launched Tennessee Promise. 4.6% increase was unprecedented at the time. We maintained that pretty well over the last 5 years. And then you saw a significant decline, obviously, due to the pandemic. Looking at Washington County, there's a 4% decrease, a little less in the state. I don't know if this is something to be like as dramatic as it is in some other counties. We have other counties that have dropped into the teens. That's how many percentage points they lost. So 4 percentage points down, though, in Washington County is certainly a cause for concern. And I think there's no better way to impact that and be involved in that than with our mentoring program. I know Linda and Aaron, both of you serve as mentors in Washington County, so you're directly involved in this. So I'm not going to try to pitch the program to you, but I will inform you on some of the things that we're going to do in 2022 to try to make the mentor program better. I know that in 2019, Aaron, I'm not sure when you first started mentoring with us, but Linda, you've been around with us for a while.
No, this is my first year.
Was this your first year?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I thought I remembered you from previous years.
Well,
So before last year, we used to have in-person meetings with students. So 2019 and back, every spring, we would all come together in high schools and cafeterias and gyms and auditoriums, and mentors and students would be seated together, and there would be this in-person interface to kind of jumpstart their relationships. In 2020, the pandemic hit in the middle of that season. So we had to cancel all of our meetings, flip the mentor program on its head, and then try to implement a virtual mentoring program with virtually no technology. In 2021, we launched Tennessee Achieves Connect, which really took our mentor program to the next level. It's a really good program. If you really dig into it and your students are digging into it, it makes for a really nice relationship. But last year, I think we found, as with all things that are new, getting just participation was tough. So we're looking at ways to improve participation in 2020. And also, if COVID allows for us to, having in-person meetings with mentors and students in the spring as well. So the mentor program in 2022, I think the right word to use is hybrid. It'll be a hybrid mentoring experience. So if you just want to mentor virtually, you can, because Tennessee Achieves Connect is going to be there. But if you want to mentor in person some as well, we're going to have 2 different ways for you to do that. The first one is through just independent meetings. If you wanted to go meet your students at a Starbucks and talk with them, you can do that. You just don't put them in your car and make sure it's at a public place. Or you can come to a scheduled Tennessee Achieves open house, which is where we'll go to an institution, reserve some space. For example, let's use March 23rd as our example here. So on March 23rd, Tennessee Achieves will reserve some room at a post-secondary institution from 2 to 6 p.m. And from 2 to 6 p.m., you can invite your students to meet you at that institution to get to know them. Tennessee Achieves isn't going to invite students and mentors specifically to do that. We're just going to say, hey, there's room available on this day. If you guys want to meet, feel free to come, because our team will be there to answer your questions. As opposed to us having this mandatory meeting where you have to be there on that date, where I don't think we're going to have that option in the spring, especially after school, those types of things. This will be a little bit in that line, in that same kind of train of thought, but we're not going to have the mandated meeting with mentors and students in the spring. I think this will give most mentors something to hang on to. I think everybody's going to have a little bit different perspective as far as what they want and how much exposure they want in the spring. So this will give you multiple options in terms of how it is that you want to meet with your students while having some Tennessee Achieves support along the way. So I think it should be a really good year, and I would hope that you guys will come back and mentor with us in 2022. We need 142 mentors in Washington County in 2022. We're on our way there already, with some people already returning and applying. But the best way for us to get to this number is for you guys to recruit a friend to join you as a mentor. That's the easiest way for us to recruit 9,000 people across the state, is to just have one person recruit one person, and that just becomes enough to serve all of the students. The deadline to apply is December 3rd, and they apply at tnAchieves.org/mentors. And just would love for you to recruit just one person to join you. I think that'll make us get to that goal pretty quickly. And in terms of ways that I think you can engage with our work, all of them are really easy. The first one is to be a mentor. You're already doing that. So if you wanted to go one step further, what does that look like? The first one of those is to connect us with your community. I know, Aaron, you connected us with your community through your podcast that I was on, which is a great way to do that. Linda, I'm not sure if you're a member of any community organizations, but if you are, we're certainly happy to come meet at those organizations and provide a program. So like, for example, I think we're honorary members of the Rotary International because we've spoken to about every Rotary club in the state of Tennessee. And we're still happy to do that. Come back as repeat guests, we will. I was telling the folks in Granger County yesterday that if there's a group of people that has ears, I'll come talk to them. I don't care what that group of people is, and I don't care how long it is. If it's 5 minutes or it's an hour, I can do any of that. But we're here to talk about tnAchieves because I think the more people that hear about it, the better. And then the last thing I'll say is that there is value in just telling somebody about Tennessee Promise. If you know a high school senior, if you know a parent of a high school senior, just remind them of Tennessee Promise. It opened on August 1st. The deadline to apply is November 1st. If a student misses that deadline, they can't apply again. So there's a lot of pressure here to get that done. Good thing is it's easy. It takes 5 minutes. They go to tnpromise.gov and apply, and that process is over with. And then they're in our system to begin receiving all of our reminders and support services from then on. So got to get that application in, and I would encourage you to just tell somebody about it before the November 1st deadline. And that's all that I have in terms of a program, but I want to answer your questions. So if you've been writing some down, you've been thinking through some questions, please let me answer those. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other. And then we'll just, I'll open it up for discussion. You can just unmute yourself and ask away.
Well, I guess I just need to express my frustration at students, at the mentees not responding. I was lucky in that 4 of my 5 met the qualifications. And at this point, in the last 2 months, I've only heard from 2 of the 4. I keep texting them all, but they just don't respond. And so I don't have a good sense of how the whole thing's working.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're not alone in that. It's certainly been a challenging year to reach students when there's not an opportunity for us to get in front of them in person. Yes. And really, set the standard right off the bat, set the precedent that you're going to have a mentor and they're going to communicate with you and you need to communicate back and just set that tone early, which we didn't have the opportunity to do that this year. I think we've sort of seen that. That's not uncommon. But what I would say to you is just stick with us, try it one more time and see if it's any better next year. I know that we're going to do more. We've learned, obviously, this year in ways that we can better serve mentors and better prepare mentors to work with students virtually, as we've learned by trial and error what works and what doesn't. So I think we're going to do a better job of getting students on tnAchieves Connect earlier so that when you're paired with them, they'll already be in the system.
Okay.
So that's kind of our goal this fall, is to figure out a way to get them in there sooner.
Okay.
I had a very similar experience, Linda. So don't feel like you're an oddball way outside the norm. I think I signed up for 5 initially, and then I think you guys contacted me and said, "Would you take another 5?" So I had 10 possible, and I think I only had 3 that made it through, and only 1 who's done any communication with me. So I feel the same. Like, I was kind of excited to help and make an impact, and then I felt like I haven't really done anything. But I had another guy that I know who's a friend who said, I have like 3 people, and I talk to him regularly. So it might just be the luck of the draw. Maybe I just it wasn't particularly engaged. So
that's definitely possible.
I've just been a bit frustrated, and I don't know what it has to do with, I never met them in person, and doing video chats is just not me. And they didn't seem to be thrilled about that either. So I don't know. Anyway,
we're definitely going to try to alleviate some of that into the future. There's always been the case where, and that's the reason we give you so many, is because there is attrition, and you're going to be paired with students that don't want to work with a mentor, because we pair every student, whether they want to be or not, with a mentor. Right. So that's always going to happen to a degree. But I think this year it was more challenging to get a hold of students, to your point, because you didn't meet them face to face. And that I think there was also, to a certain extent, some virtual fatigue. for students that
Right.
they're feeling. Everything that they're doing and that they were expected to do last year was virtual.
Yeah.
And so they're like, just another thing, And
Yeah.
so I think,
Well, I have another comment about that is
sure.
I get so many Tennessee Achieves emails that I tend to not pay a whole lot of attention. So I'm just wondering if maybe there could be fewer, but every one of them be something very important rather than having, 3 or 4 or 5 a week. That's a little email fatigue.
Yeah. I understand. Loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay. That's all my complaints today. But
I
thank you for
appreciate
being
your
there.
feedback.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
You mentioned you're going to need 142 mentors next year for Washington County. How many did we have this year, and did we have enough that met our need as a county, or was that part of the reason why like additional students were assigned to some mentors because we were kind of short of our target?
Let me pull the numbers up for you, just so that I don't speak out of turn. I'm not sure where we landed last year in terms of mentors in Washington. I can pull that up really quickly, though. We have a dashboard for that. One thing I will say, which high school did you mentor?
I think I was at Daniel Boone.
Daniel Boone.
Or Daniel Boone.
Okay, so in a lot of cases, it's more high school specific when we ask you to take on extra students. It's not because we didn't get enough in the county, but sometimes a certain high school didn't have enough. So in that case, we might have an abundance at a place like Science Hill and not enough at a place like Daniel Boone. So in that case, then we do have to ask you to take on extras. But let's see, Washington County needed 142. Well, yeah, we needed 142. We recruited 159. So we actually recruited way more than we needed, which is great. But again, to answer your question, there just may not have been enough that selected Daniel Boone, and we weren't able to get enough people to move to Daniel Boone to cover the full amount.
Yeah. Do you is the goal to really keep people in the county where they live? I mean, like we used to live in Carter County. My wife teaches in Carter County at Milligan, and I know at least as we were approaching the deadline, there were shortages in some of the other counties. Do you do that kind of load balancing, or like if we're open to doing that, like I would be happy to do that.
Yeah.
If the need is greater in a neighboring county, I would be happy to serve as a mentor wherever I'm needed most. So I guess I throw that out there as an offer and a question. I don't know how that works.
Yes. So you don't have to be in the county that you live in. Certainly not. You can pick the county that you prefer. And if you happen to see on the dashboard that Washington County is doing well and Carter needs an extra mentor or two, and you're willing to move, by all means, we would love to move you over there. The only thing we can't do is pair you in both counties. So some people want to do multiple counties, but our technology only allows us to pair you in one spot because we use your county as your identifier in our system. So, but yeah, I mean, if you're interested in moving to Carter, we can put you at the high school. If you want Elizabethton, if you want Happy Valley, it doesn't matter. Wherever you want to go, we can pair you in Carter, no doubt. We always need mentors in Carter County.
And should we just note that when we apply again?
I can make the change now, and that would be for 2022 if you wanted me to go ahead and just do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like you said, go online. Like, do we need to manually do that, or can I just say, yeah, I'll do it again next year, and you like press a button and it's done?
Yep. Yep.
I would like to simple register, whatever button that is. Go ahead and press
You've already done it.
All right, good. Yeah, thanks.
That's it.
I had one. Shoot, there was another question I thought of. I'm trying to remember what it is. I'm talking a lot, so I'll pause. Maybe.
No. You're good.
Well, I have another question.
Okay.
And this came up in a conversation with my grandson, who graduated from Daniel Boone in 2020. He did the whole process and then did not go. He said he'd gotten some kind of an email saying that they were going to offer again for those 2020 students. Is that correct?
It was, yes. So we called those students, we titled them internally as gap year students.
Okay.
So because of the pandemic, we were given the freedom essentially to offer Tennessee Promise enrollment to them for fall 2021. So if that student followed through with all the requirements, which was filing a FAFSA, submitting community service, and doing all of that, they were able to enroll this fall with Tennessee Promise a year later. Only that one time, though.
Okay, it's passed now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm the frustrated grandmother who he's not ready to go yet. But he did mention that the other day, and I hadn't heard anything about it. So I'm glad to know that it was a possibility for some
It
folks.
was, and it might still be. What's his name? Let me pull his file up here.
His name is Cameron Felton, Felten.
Yeah, he didn't submit his FAFSA by the deadline, so he's not going to.
Yeah, well, I keep, grandmas, there's a limit to what grandmas can do.
Definitely.
So I tried.
Yeah, but that option was there. He did decipher that correctly.
Okay, well, that's good to know that he at least read the email.
He did.
And did it correctly. So, and I'm glad for all those other students who just couldn't make it last year because of many problems. So
sure.
I remembered my other question. I think it was two. So one was related to community service. Was the community service hour, like the service component, waived and you just had to do some sort of online viewing of a video thing? Do I remember that right?
Yes. So we waived, I got to think back now. So the April 1st, 2020 deadline was waived. July 1st, 2020 deadline was waived. These are waived completely. The December 1st, 2020 deadline was waived completely. The April 1st, 2021 deadline was waived completely. And then we held the July 1st, 2021 deadline. So we went an entire calendar year without a community service deadline, but we did have the virtual community service that students could watch the webinars, but they could also do it in person. So it was just an extra option for them.
Yeah, that's what I was trying, as you quoted the number of hours of service. I assume that included people that watched those videos and actually completed community service.
Correct. Yeah, we had over 80,000 hours of those watched.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, and during COVID, that was a good way to pivot.
It was.
Do you guys track at all, like where people are volunteering, and is there I'm wondering how that piece of information, I think could really be helpful to the nonprofit sector as a whole, but I know that's not your primary mission. I was just curious, when they say, yeah, I volunteered, how robust is what you ask them about that? Do they tell you, I did 8 hours at this food pantry, or I did, 4 hours at my church and 4 hours, I did a whatever? Or is it pretty minimal what you collect?
It's a good question. We get asked this question occasionally, not often enough to where it's very robust in terms of categorizing community service. One of the hard parts for that in general is there are so many varieties of organizations that exist. So it's hard for us to do like a drop down menu of things that they're doing. We do track that to an extent. So we have some data. I can't regurgitate any of that right now,
Sure.
But a percentage of like where students volunteer. But overall, I can tell you that just kind of anecdotally, the way it feels is a lot of students volunteer at their churches, a lot. And a lot of students volunteer through their school. So they find things to do at their actual school. Specifically for that first deadline when they're still in high school, they'll work a concession stand or something like that.
Sure.
And then it feels like, just looking at data, it feels like a lot of students go to like animal shelters and they do a lot of things with animal care and like nursing homes and those types of things. But you'd be surprised how broad it really is. And the things that people do. This year was hard to track because there were so many people doing the virtual hours. But in years past, we could do a better job of that. That's something that we're actually thinking about doing better, is tracking the actual industry that they're volunteering in, because I think it is valuable in the long run. We have historically hijacked the community service form to force them into other survey questions that we want to know the answers to, like our first generation student, transfer, like, are you planning to transfer? We use it to ask that question.
Yeah. And if it's a 75-minute survey, I get that you want to focus on your mission and your core mission and not tangential things.
Right.
And the more tangential all the questions get of all the potential data points you're trying to collect, then the survey becomes longer. And just like I said, can't you just press a button and re-enroll me? Everyone wants the simplest process. So I completely get that. I was just curious because I could imagine that being very helpful from also an ROI perspective. Like if you're able to show that our students continue in community service at a higher percentage than their peers, that's also a worthwhile investment from a state funding allocation because you're investing in charitable service oriented young people, so if that's an investment of state dollars, it's not just education, but people that are community minded, and you can point to exactly how much more community minded the people are. I would think something like that would be tremendously inspiring and or persuasive for people who hold the purse strings. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Again, I realize you guys are limited on your manpower and what priorities you can make. So I get it. Last question for me. When you quoted the data on the college enrolled, do you collect data? You mentioned like counties like ours that have ETSUs. So people who are eligible at a higher percentage are probably going to go to a 4-year, which makes them not contained in your yield, right?
Right.
Do you have that total slice of the pie that includes Tennessee Promise? Plus, it wasn't that these people didn't go. They went, they just didn't go through our program.
So that's a good question. Some years we pull that and some years we don't. So for us to get this data, we have to pull from Clearinghouse. And so obviously, this, it costs a lot of money to pull. It's per head. So in some years, I don't think this year in 2021, we pulled for I think we just pulled on eligible students to figure out where they went, because we were looking for like retention rates and grad and completion rates, those types of things. But I would imagine that in the future, we'll pull that for all students, because we do want to know, we have the data point of 74% of fall retention of if they're anywhere. So we know that in terms of like a student that touched tnAchieves and then went on somewhere else, that's our retention rate for them. So that data does exist, but we don't pull it every year, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. I'm amazed at all the data you guys have. So those are just questions that occurred to me. So I'm not at all suggesting like, you idiots, you're not doing the right things.
No, definitely not.
I'm impressed what you all are able to like tease out in terms of data points. So thanks for all you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. We're actually working even more on that. I was working on that today in terms of breaking down retention and completion rates by demographic. So we're digging into that a little bit more too. So looking at where that falls. So if you ever have questions about data, just email me. I'm happy to answer those. And any inquiry that you have, we'll do our best to track it down. I would also recommend, have you ever looked at scores data?
I have a little bit. Yeah. I knew that they had quite a bit as well.
They do a great job of analyzing and doing like county by county updates and things like that. So I would recommend just taking some time just digging into all of their data reports that they have. It is really interesting. And we partner with them on a lot of that. We provide them with data, they provide us with data, and we help inform their data reports that they provide. So
that's great.
Yeah, partner organization for sure. Awesome, guys. Well, I appreciate it, Aaron. I'm glad you hopped on here. You always have really good questions. So appreciate you guys for joining us. If you don't have anything else, that's all that I have. And hope you guys have a great rest of the week and a good weekend.
All righty. Thank you so much. It was very helpful to actually have real people.
Thanks, Linda.
So look forward to continuing with my students this fall.
Awesome. And then let us know if you ever need anything.
All righty. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
See you guys.